So very good evening to all of you, and welcome to the discussion on recently introduced section 43BH. Certainly it has a very wide. So very good evening to all of you, and welcome to the discussion on. Certainly it has very wide ramification for all the business enterprises, irrespective of the fact whether they are covered under the tax audit or not. So many participants are still joining, so we may take a couple of minutes. Deepak bhai asked how is everything going and how you are feeling after really stepping down from a chairmanship. So I think chairmanship is one of the biggest blessings that one can get, to serve as a fraternity. To serve fraternity as a chairman is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I am thankful to all of you for giving me blessings and supporting me to do my duties and to work for the fraternity. And with the grace of God, that 1 year went very well. I was able to give my full time to the regional council. ना मैं बीमार हुआ ना घर पे कुछ काम में मेरी जरूरत पड़ी. So that went well, and now I'm back to the academics, which I enjoy, since very beginning. So now, without taking much of a time, so section 43BH, section 43B is not new to us. So let me open a presentation, so which I have made for you, and I would be sharing this presentation. We have a WhatsApp community. In that WhatsApp community, I would be sharing this presentation. So if you are not part of the WhatsApp community, I would request all of you to kindly join that WhatsApp community. I would request all of you to kindly put yourself on a mute mode so that you can listen to me. And in case if you have any query, you may please raise your hand. I would request all of you to kindly mute your mics so that no one gets disturbed and we focus.
ठीक है, February हो गया.
Atul ji, please put yourself in the mute mode. So we have section 43BH. The first point is, since when it is applicable? It is applicable from assessment year 24-25. That is from financial year 23-24. So when we all would be computing the return of our income, we would filing the return and computing the tax liability for the financial year 23-24. Section 43BH will come into the picture. So how it is, how it reads. Certain deductions to be only on an actual payment basis. Section 43B says, notwithstanding anything contained in any other provision of this Act, a deduction otherwise allowable under this Act in respect of, there are other provisions, but I'm focusing on subclause H. Any sum payable by the SSC to a micro or small enterprise beyond the limit specified in section 15 of the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise Development Act 2006 shall be allowed irrespective of the previous elimination of liability to pay such sum was incurred by the SSC according to the methods of accounting regularly employed by him, only in computing the income referred to in section 28 of that previous year in which such sum is actually paid by him. Provided that nothing contained in this section shall apply except the provision of clause H shall apply in relation to any sum which is actually paid by the assessee on or before the due date applicable in his case for furnishing the return of income under subsection 1 of section 139. In respect of previous year in which the liability to pay such sum was actually incurred, as aforesaid, the evidence of such payment is furnished by the assessee along with such return. So broadly, section 43B says even if you're following the mercantile basis of accounting or the accrual basis of accounting, but in case if you are claiming certain expenditure which are listed in 43B, those expenses or deductions would only be allowed based on the actual payment basis. In all the cases, except the newly inserted clause H, if the taxpayer makes a payment with regard to deductions or an expenditure listed in 43B before the filing of return of income for that particular previous year or assessment year, the expenditures would be allowed. So for example, let's say a provision relating to any expense which is listed in 43B might be, we can say, taxes, which are paid till the filing of return. The same would be allowed in financial year 23-24. However, with regard to clause H, this provision does not allow the timeline. So if there is some outstanding with regard to micro and small enterprise, and if it is paid after 31st March 2024, in such a case, that may be allowed or may not be allowed. So for example, let's say there is an expense or the amount is payable, let's say 10 lakh rupees to micro or small enterprises, and you have paid that 10 lakh after 31st March 2024, but before filing the return of income. So that expense may be allowed as a deduction while computing return of income for financial year 23-24, or that expense may not be allowed. So in what cases that expense would be allowed and in what cases that expense would not be allowed, we're going to discuss in depth in this discussion. So this is broadly about 43B. So what I've done, we'll take few, we'll go one by one, we're going to bisect this 43B in various parts and discuss this 43B in different details and issues arising from the wordings of section 43B read with the MSME DA Act 2006. And if you have any query, I will suggest to kindly raise your hand so that we can discuss your query at the appropriate time. So first of all, let's start with notwithstanding anything, which means it's a non-obstantly clause which overrides all other provisions of the Act. So if any item is falling under 43B, it is governed by 43B, and 43B being non-obstantly clause, it's override the other provisions of the Act, which primarily means for the purpose of computation that even if you're following mercantile system of accounting, in such cases as well, you would be pushed, or rather you would be forced to follow cash system of accounting for the listed items. And now, because we are discussing 43BH, so for the amount which is claimed as a deduction and outstanding at the year end would be allowed only on the basis of cash. However, this 43B or 43BH is not applicable in case of if someone is following presumptive basis of taxation. More specifically, section 44AD, 44ADA, 44AE, 44BBB, triple five, 115VA. So if you are following any of the provision, or broadly the presumptive taxation, in that case, 43BH is not applicable. Section 43B, it says a deduction otherwise allowable. So 43B relates to computation of income under the head business and profession. Just give me a minute. Section 43B is applicable while computing income under the head profit and gains of business profession. And there must be a deduction. So if one has claimed the deduction, which is otherwise allowable, which qualifies the other test given under the Income Tax Act, only on those deductions this 43B would be applicable. So wherein one has not claimed any deduction, or the item appearing or the item outstanding at the year end is not claimed as a deduction, then it will not fall under the provisions of 43BH. So which means we can take example, let's say if you have bought a goods worth rupees 90 lakh during financial year 22-23 from micro and small enterprises, and out of the same you have paid 70 lakhs and 20 lakhs is still outstanding on 31st March 2024. So being, the first test is that you must have claimed the deduction during the year of such outstanding amount. So in this case, though this 20 lakh is outstanding, but one has not claimed the deduction in the current year, and thus this outstanding, the amount outstanding at the year end, that is on 31st March 2024, which pertains to previous year, will not fall under section 43BH. So the deduction, the point is the deduction must have been claimed during the year, and the amount outstanding pertains to that deduction. And certainly that deduction must have been payable to micro or small enterprise. There could be a question that what will happen to the provision? Let's say if the provision is outstanding on 31st March 2024. So whether this 43BH is applicable on that provision, the question comes, have you claimed that provision as an expense? If the answer is yes, the second question, is it payable? Because if it is not payable, then it will not fall under 43BH, because what 43BH says, let's read the 43BH. Any sum payable by the SSC. So even though we have a provision, but the question comes, is that provision payable? And if that provision is payable, certainly it will fall under the ambit of 43BH, and if it is not payable, it will not fall under the provisions of 43BH. So now if SSC, there is a common example that, let's say if SSC creates a provision for the fees of an accountant or an auditor, whether it attracts 43BH or not, to my understanding, it will not attract 43BH, because by 31st March services were not rendered, so it has not become payable. nor we have raised any invoice, so it is not payable. And being it is not payable, it is only a provision. So the taxpayer might be able to claim an expense on the accrual basis, and but it will not attract 43BH. So we have already discussed that any sum payable by the assessee. So it is a deduction otherwise allowable under this act in respect of any sum payable by the assessee. So this I was discussing in the earlier slide also, that there must be some payable. There must be an account balance payable in respect of deduction claimed in the current year. If that is not the case, to my understanding, it will not fall within 43BH. So the big question comes, whether the depreciation falls under 43BH or not. Whether if someone has bought the capital asset, whether it will, and the payment is outstanding on 31st March 2024, whether we need to test, section 15 of MSME, or we need to test 43BH on the purchase of capital asset. I understand there is journal, there are two school of thoughts. One school of thought says 43BH is not applicable on the capital assets. Whereas I belong to a second school of thought, and to my reading of the law, 43BH is applicable on the purchase of capital assets. Why I am saying this? Now, if you go back to the first section, 43, it says, notwithstanding anything contained in any other provision of this act, a deduction otherwise allowable. So it refers to deduction and it does not refers to expenditure. So certainly we all know that depreciation is not an expenditure, but question comes, is depreciation a deduction? But if you read section 32, on many occasions, they have used the word that the deduction should be restricted. So let me share section 32 with you.
Gaurav sir, I have a query regarding provision.
Yeah, please.
So you said that provision is not payable till the bill is raised, but it has been claimed as deduction, right? But once we raise the bill and there has been delay in payment, what will be the implication? Because the deduction will have been claimed by the party in previous year, and the impact is for delayed payment comes in next year.
So there must be, two conditions simultaneously fulfilled, that there must be a deduction in the subject year and the amount payable is with regard to the deduction. Now, when the provision is claimed, and when the provision is made in the first year and there's a bill raised in the second year, in that case, there may be the amount outstanding at the year end of the year end of year two, but there is no deduction, there is no corresponding deduction to such outstanding in the year two.
Absolutely
So,
right.
to my understanding, in such a case, 43B fails to get triggered. 43BH.
That's true. But in that case, in most of the cases, when auditors provision, fee provision is being done by the companies and other entities, and even if there is default, there will be not any repercussion in that case, no, sir?
No. So there are two repercussions. One, the repercussion under MSME Act. So under MSME Act, the payment of interest, after the appointed date of 45 days, which is 3 times of the interest announced by the RBI for MSME, that will still hold good. So what will get curtailed, or the limited impact would be under the Income Tax Act, that the current wordings of Income Tax Act will not going to favor micro and small enterprise in such a case. But yes, if there is a invoice raised on invoice raised by micro and small enterprise, which is delayed beyond 45 days, for example, because 45 days is the maximum limit. In such a case, still a entity who is required to make payment to micro or small enterprise is still required to make the provision of interest in the books. And that interest is not allowable under the Income Tax Act. So to say that there would not going to be any impact, I think that statement may not be
No,
100%.
impact will be there, but the disallowance will not be there in that
I
case.
do agree. This is what the view coming up.
And the second thing is that with regard to interest provision, most of the companies are not providing that. So what's the role of the auditor in that case? Are we supposed to calculate and provide, or we are just supposed to disown in tax audit report?
Maybe if interest is not provided in the annual accounts, then it raises the question on true and fair view of the profit and loss account and the balance sheet. Plus, they are not following the regulation, though I'm not from the audit background, except did the audit in the articleship days. But to best of my mind, if the law very clearly says that there must be an interest, I think auditor is required to report in its auditor's report. That must be reported.
Thank you, sir.
Now, if you see section 32, it talks about deductions, the following deduction shall be allowed. Now, provided that no deduction shall be allowed under this clause in respect of any motor vehicle. So what I wish to highlight, the depreciation is indeed a deduction. So it says deduction in respect of such asset shall be allowed on such percentage. So if you ask me, then even the capital assets gets covered under.
Sir, may I add here? I beg to differ here.
Yes, Pankaj, please.
Here, there the term is sum payable in respect of deduction.
Yes.
And that sum payable is not in respect of their depreciation. You
agree.
compare all the other sections.
I agree.
There is deduction in respect of respective expenditures. Here, depreciation is in respect of an expenditure in respect of certain assets, as the language goes, and so the sum payable cannot be said to be in respect of depreciation.
I agree, Pankaj. I said in the beginning there are two school of thoughts, and I belong to second school of thought that because the word is not expenditure.
So you just mean, then what will be the disallowance, depreciation amount or the total expenditure?
Depreciation amount, which is claimed as a deduction.
So every year it will go? Because
Yes.
you see, suppose
till the amount is outstanding, not every year, till the amount is outstanding.
Because in the second year I pay, I beg to differ here, because depreciation is on a different footing and different connotation. Because it does not mean that some payable or depreciation will get disallowed to that extent. And there is some similar provision also where they have brought in something but not applicable here.
Pankaj, I appreciate your point. I'm saying there is school of thought which you are saying, but I do not belong to that school of thought. I'm sharing my perspective. Yes, there is school of thought which says 43BH is not invited on the capital expenditure. I have gone through literature. I have discussed with other speakers also. But in my humble view, I would like to go with a conservative view, would like to go with a second school of thought. And to my understanding, there is high probability that 43BH will be attracted.
Gaurav, depreciation is not a expenditure. It is allowance.
I agree, but it does not talk about expenditure. 43B talks about deduction. And if you refer section 32, on several occasions, it refer it as a deduction.
No, since all the sections are using the term deduction only. You see 31, 30, all those sections, the following deduction shall be allowed. And in that case, if we read the harmonious construction, 43B says sum payable in respect of. And if we see the other entries there also, they are the respective entries where the deduction is allowed in toto. not only a percentage of that. 43B के other item देखो आप A to G, all are in the expenditure realm. They are not in the capital field. And it does not say that only a proportionate depreciation. The sum payable is not in respect of depreciation. Sum payable is in respect of building, machinery, plant, or furniture.
Because I have heard you. I would suggest, see, if you read 48(2), it specifically says where the assessee incurs any expenditure in respect of which payment has been made. So there is a difference between expenditure and deduction. So we may
Sure.
agree to disagree on this point.
Sure.
I appreciate your point, and I am aware that this view is taken by many consultants, rather I think most of the consultants. But I have my own reservation on that view. I fairly appreciate your point. So now we may.
गौरव जी गुड इवनिंग.
गुड इवनिंग अतुल जी.
कैसे हैं?
मैं बहुत
अच्छा,
बढ़िया
इसके
अतुल जी.
अंदर ना अगर किसी प्लांट एंड मशीनरी की कैपिटल पेमेंट के अगेंस्ट कोई आउटस्टैंडिंग है, वो तो समझ में आता है. Because when you enter depreciation, you debit depreciation and credit the asset. So there is no MSME involved in this entry. The only person involved is at the time of purchase, and if that amount is outstanding, that can be understandably be disallowed. But that is again not a claim. That's not a deduction we are claiming.
Really, Atul ji, I understand. I am not denying what you are saying is a school of thought which is largely followed in this case. I think almost everyone is saying that capital expenditure is not covered under 43B because of the reason given by you and other members. But if you read section 32, this is my view, this is my view. I'm saying it may be a conservative view, but I would like to stick with this view until we have the clear directions. So now I would like to proceed on this point. Now, 43B is applicable on all types of SSC which are computing income under the head business and profit and gains of business profession, whether you are an individual, you are an HUF, you are a company, you are, whatever your status is, if you are computing income under the head business and profession, you may be doing manufacturing, you may be doing trading, you may be doing services. It is applicable on all type of taxpayers. The amount shall be payable to micro and small enterprise as per explanation 4 of the Act. Micro enterprise shall have the meaning assigned to it in clause H of section 2 of the micro, small and medium enterprises. Small, again, for micro and small, we need to refer MSME Act. There is also a definition of enterprise. So if we read micro and small, this MSME Act, it is applicable on the industrial undertaking, that is manufacturing, and also the entities involved in services. As far as micro and small enterprise, so it is not applicable on the micro and small enterprise does not cover in general a trading entity. So it only covers entities which are involved in manufacturing, which are industrial undertaking or production of goods, or which are involved in services.
Gaurav, जिसमें एक issue ये भी है जो there are two schools of thought that MSME has to be registered under the MSME Act or not. Most of the take is that it should be an MSME whether registered or not. The entity should be MSME. Registration is not made mandatory in this case, at least under the Income Tax Act.
So I belong to second school of thought because we will come to that. So we'll come to that. So the micro and small enterprise definitions, the category, if your net investment plant and machinery does not exceed 1 crore and the turnover does not exceed 5 crore, you fall within the meaning of micro. And if it is, less than 10 crores and less than 50 crores, you fall within the meaning of small. Our retail trader and wholesalers are also covered within the scope of 43BH. There is a big debate going on, but to best of my mind, retail traders and wholesalers are not covered within the scope of 43BH. Why there is a confusion? Because of some office memorandum. Certainly that office memorandum, if you'll read, it's only for a limited purpose, for the purpose of financing and not otherwise. This specifically says that any other benefit given under the MSME Act will not be extended to 43B. Will not be extended to wholesale and retail entities. Now, again, if we go back to 43BH, it says that if the amount is outstanding beyond the time limit specified in section 15. So where any supplier supplies any goods or renders any services to any buyer, the buyer shall make payment thereof before the date agreed upon between him and the supplier in writing, where there is no agreement in this behalf before the appointed date, provided that in no case the period agreed upon between supplier and the buyer in writing shall exceed 45 days from the day of acceptance or the day of deemed acceptance. So, what is the definition of supplier? Supplier means a micro or small enterprise which has filed a memorandum with the authority referred to in subsection 1 of section 8 and includes, which means that technically the timeline given in section 15 is attached to the supplier. And unless we interpret supplier, we may not be able to interpret section 15. And if we read the meaning of section 15 or definition of section 15 given in MSME Act to section 2N, it says means a micro or small enterprise which has filed a memorandum, that is, which is registered with the authority referred to in subsection 8 of and includes. There are 3 enterprises, and if you go to the point number 3, let's point number 1 and 2. It says National Small Industrial Corporation being a company registered under the Companies Act, the Small Industrial Development Corporation of a state or union territory by whatever name called, or any company or cooperative society, trust or body by whatever name called, registered or constituted under any law for the time being in force and is engaged in selling goods produced by micro or small enterprise and rendering services which are provided by such enterprise. So the word supplier, in addition to micro and small enterprise, includes the entities involved in buying and selling of goods from micro and small enterprises. Now, this is only for section 15, but not otherwise. And if we go back to our Act, Income Tax Act, it says any sum payable by the SSC to a micro or small enterprise beyond the time limit specified in section 15. So this time limit specified in section 16 is very much linked and attached to supplier. So one must be a micro or small enterprise plus a supplier. So if you're a micro small enterprise, that is, you may be a micro small enterprise, you may not be a registered, which is one view. But in order to that this time limit get attracts to you, you must be a supplier. And supplier is a person who is registered. Supplier is a person who has filed the memorandum. And in addition to this, even a trading organization which is directly buying goods from the manufacturing entity and selling it to the other parties is also a supplier. But then this entity which is trading is not micro or small enterprise, because micro small would necessarily means that you must be a manufacturer or a service provider. So for a payment perspective, because these entities are buying and selling from micro and small enterprise, so there must be some comfort given to them. So section 15 uses the word supplier and not enterprise. It never uses the word micro or small. So there are 3-4 words, which you see MSME Act uses They use small enterprise, micro enterprises, they use enterprise, they use industrial undertaking, they use supplier. But when it comes to section 15, they are using the word supplier and not micro or small, because they don't want to restrict section 15 to micro or small enterprises. They have expanded the definition applicability of section 15 beyond micro or small enterprise to include those entities as well, which are somewhere related to micro or small enterprises. Because all these national small and industrial corporations, small industries development corporation, the entities involved in selling goods produced by micro small enterprise are buying and selling. So the time limit which they want to define under section 15 for that purpose, they have not only given the benefit to the entities involved in manufacturing or providing services, but they have also included the another person in the supply chain who is directly buying goods from these entities and selling them, maybe in a form of national small industrial corporations, or maybe in the form of small industries development corporations, or maybe in any other form. But the objective is, these entities, what they do, they primarily buy from small enterprises or micro enterprises and sell it to the larger customers, and thus they become part of supply chain. Because generally what will happen is micro small enterprise, they may not have that dedicated marketing team, dedicated sales team, and these are very small players, coming from maybe tier 3 cities, tier 2 cities, small enterprises run by an individual. So in order to support them, all these facilities are there. So they are saying to them also, we will give the advantage of making payment within the due date as given in section 15. But
Gaurav
they
ji,
are not.
so
Let
Gaurav
me
ji, so,
let me complete. Let
हाँ
me
जी,
complete. But they are not. These traders are not micro or small enterprises. So now we have two sections, two acts. One is the Income Tax Act, and another is the MSME Act. Now, as far as Income Tax Act is concerned, the disallowance under section 43B is restricted if you are buying from micro or small enterprise. Correct? But if you are buying from a trader, the 43B does not get attracted. But when you shift from Income Tax Act to the MSME Act, if you are buying from a micro or small enterprise or any other supplier listed in 2N, the limits of section 15, which is liability of a buyer to make payments, will get attracted, which means in this case, one one needs to follow that 15 days and 45 days rule plus, the interest. But when it comes to the Income Tax Act, if you have bought it from a trading entity, you will 43B will not get attracted, and it will only get attracted if you are micro small enterprise plus qualifies to be a supplier, that is, you are registered. So in my humble view, under 43B, micro small enterprise which are registered will only attract the time limit given in section 15, and that is the objective of bringing 43BH. Because if we see MSME Samadhan, they are indeed working on the recovery of payments, wherein the supplier is not able to recover a payment from the buyer. They make file a complaint or file an application to MSME Samadhan. So in order to strengthen that MSME Samadhan, 43BH has been brought in. So to best of my understanding, 43BH will be applicable on only registered micro or small enterprises, because if you are not registered, then limits of section 15 will not apply. And now what limits of section 15 are? That if there is, if you have agreed for a payment, if there is a term or an agreement, then within 45 days, you must make a payment to the supplier. Even if the term agreed is more than 45 days, but certainly as per the law, as per section 15 of the MSME Act, the term cannot be more than 45 days. We have a appointed date as well, wherein there are no terms. We have not agreed for any specific terms or days. In such a case, the appointed day will come into the picture. Appointed day means the day following immediately after the expiry of the 15 days from the date of acceptance of the day or deemed acceptance of any goods or services. So let's say if I have provided you the services and there is no issues within the services provided, then again under as per MSME Act, the amount becomes payable after 15 days. But under Income Tax Act, it needs to be a deduction. So which means either you will receive an invoice from me, or you will the provision will be created by the auditor. Auditor will say, because you have received the services, now you must create a provision. Now, if you see where the issue is, so if you have received the invoice, even after 15 or 20 days or 30 days or 40 days, whatever, we will see the amount payable from the date of invoice or from the appointed date. So let's say the services was provided in the month of February, and by 29th of February, the services got over, which means on 16th March, first 15 days, if I leave on 16th March, the amount becomes payable as per MSME Act. There is an appointed date. There is no agreement. There is an appointed date. And as per that appointed date, the amount becomes payable on 16th March. But let's say the client has received an invoice on 27th of March. Now and the invoice says 7 days period from the date of issue an invoice. So my question to you is, what date, on 31st March, whether the invoice is payable or the invoice is not payable as per section 15. Because if it is payable and if it has already crossed the threshold of 15 days, then you need to make the interest provision in the books, plus it would not be allowed. It would only be allowed in the year in which you are making the payment. Let's assume in 24, 25 you are making the payment. In that year it will be allowed. But let's say if we reckon the limitation period from the invoice date, so invoice is raised on 28th of March. From that, if you count 7 days, 29, 30, 31st, 1, 2, 3, 4. So by 4th of April, and you makes payment on 3rd of April. So what would be the position on 31st March? Should it be treated as amount paid within the specified time limit, or should we treat it as the amount is not paid within the specified limit and thus it should be allowed in the next year? What is the view of the House?
I think so. Basically, there is one issue in this case. It is not the date of invoice, but it is acceptance of services. He issues an invoice and doesn't send the goods, then my liability still doesn't accrue. So I think if you go by MSME and 43BH also, the amount hasn't become payable because the goods have not been received and services have not been rendered.
Very true, sir. That is slightly easy case, because if you have received the invoice but not received the goods, one can always say that it has not become payable. I'm saying reverse, wherein you have received the goods or services, but you have not received the invoice, then what will happen? And you have received the invoice towards the end of the year.
Then if the payment is made on the 4th, as per your example, then it is within the time.
So you are
Then
reckoning
wait for the 15 days.
So 15 days got over on the 15th March.
No, but we don't have to wait. If the agreement is less than 15 days, then it becomes due and payable on that day.
Now, let's say if I simply raise this invoice on 28th March and it does not mention by when it will become payable, then what would be the answer? and I makes payment on 3rd or 4th of April.
Then within 15 days is to be paid. If there is no specific date, then within 15 days.
So what we are referring 15 days from the date of invoice. But appointed date, what appointed date says, the day of the actual delivery of goods or the rendering of services. So the services got delivered on 29th February. The invoice was received on 28th March.
In that case, my obligation is to pay within 15 days, but I must know how much is to be paid. That will be the issue. I don't even know how much is to be paid because no formal invoice has been sent to me. It could be goods on approval also. Unless an invoice is raised, the liability doesn't accrue. That is my take.
Okay. Any other view?
Sir, it is 15 days from the date of service.
So which means, yes, so I would suggest kindly raise your hand and let's go one by one. It is very interesting point. The law is in front of you, the facts are in front of you, and we may be inquiring, encountering more facts like this. So Rajesh ji, please.
In my view, the law is saying that it should be payable on 31st March. It means payable is payable, or even the invoice was raised on 27th of March and on 31st March is outstanding and the deduction has been claimed. Where is the question of due or not due? Is there a clarified in the act?
No, it is not clarified in the act. So we have two acts. One is Income Tax Act, which we see, okay, once I will book the invoice, then it becomes the payable, correct? But then the Income Tax Act says ki for the time limit, kindly refer to the MSME Act. Now, if I go to MSME Act does not, prescribe limit from the date of issue of invoice. MSME Act prescribes limit from the date of renderation of services, which we are saying that it is, 29th February in this case.
So it's on the judgment of the auditor whether it should added back that amount as in payable or not, if it is not due within 31st March.
If the invoice has been received on 28th March, then as of 31st March it becomes due. And since the services have been received or goods have been received on 29th February, then 15 days expire on the 15th of March.
Yes, sir, this is what I'm saying. Now you got my worry.
We have to go by the MSME Act.
Now, if you go by MSME Act, it simply means even if you received invoice on 28th March, you must clear the payment by 31st March.
Right.
Any other view? Anshul, please unmute
In
yourself.
fact, MSME Act, according to MS, I should have paid by 14th of March. Yes. Because the law says before the appointed day. Appointed day is the 16th day. So it is before the appointed day, means by 15th I must pay.
Because, sir, it is also applicable on deemed acceptance of goods or services. So only it not only talks about the acceptance, it also talks about deemed acceptance. The day of deemed acceptance means where no objection is made within writing by the buyer regarding the acceptance of goods or services within 15 days from the date of delivery of goods or rendering of services.
Exactly. So deemed acceptance, if no objection has been raised, then it is go from the day of the acceptance of the goods.
Absolutely. Now, if that is the case, I think situation is getting more murkier. Anshul, please, Anshul, please share your view.
Yeah, so to be very frank, my opinion is that we need to quantify the expense first, and we can quantify the expense on the basis of invoice or some documentation that we have.
No, let's say there is an agreement. There is an agreement that the value of services is, maybe let's say 10 lakh rupees.
But that agreement, I don't think will hold any substance until at least it is a proper genuine invoice. If there is an invoice, and practically we think, if there is a grudge, there is a grudge between the two parties, and every time it will happen that just maybe the party will not issue an invoice on the 31st March even. It can issue an invoice in the month of April
Acha,
will
no,
then
let's
that expenditure?
Anshu, let's make it slightly different.
Hmm.
You have not received the invoice, correct? Services are completed. You have got the agreement. What provision you will make in the books?
So, as far as provision is concerned, there's nothing to be made provision of, because I don't have the quantification of that provision that has to be made. That is
Provision has to be made for 10 lakhs because the agreement is there for 10 lakhs.
If now this is the provision, I'm very clear on this. If we have made a provision on 31st March, now if I wishes to claim that as a deduction, then I'm getting hit by MSME Act because I should have made the payment by 15th of March, which I have not done as per, section 15 read with section 2B. In such a case, the provision would not be allowed. So when we were discussing initially, that provision would be allowed. Now, this is the case wherein the provision would not be allowed as an expense because it is still outstanding. And if I go by the 43BH read with section 15 of the MSME read with section 2, it is an amount payable which is not paid, and now it will be allowed when I will make the payment.
And Gauravji, provision means an indirect acceptance of your liability.
Absolutely, sir. So this is what I'm saying. If something is applicable on the provision, will it not be applicable on the invoice? If something is applicable on the provision when invoice is not there, so how the situation will change when invoice is raised on 28th of March? So I feel, we need to be very clear when taking this position, whether one should be allowed or not allowed. And I see it as first of all, a sort of a tiff between the auditor and the corporates, and then later on by the tax departments. Pankaj, you have to say something on this, Pankaj Agarwalji.
I look at it, this provision, because the day of acceptance means we have to do some purposive interpretation also here. Because if there is an understanding that payment will be made on raising of the invoice only, because this situation will take care of those cases where invoices are raised, goods are dispatched from, say, Lucknow to Delhi. Invoice will be raised today, but the goods will be received, say, 5 days later on in Delhi. Then it cannot be the date of invoice. Though in MSME Act it is not taken care of, but we will have to, because there is a one condition, shall make payment therefore on or before the date agreed upon. So this can be that it is agreed upon that payment will be made on raising of the claim by way of raising of invoice only. So we can say that this acceptance will come into wherever there is an invoice. So the claim will arise only on raising of invoice.
Sir, MSME has taken care of the goods.
It is
It is acceptance. Even if the person raises an invoice on the 1st of March and your goods are received on the 10th of March, your acceptance of goods will be 10th of March.
Absolutely. So goods के केस में सर मुझे नहीं लगता इतना चैलेंज आएगा because of e-way bill and GST, जो भी the one who are practicing in GST generally invoice raise हो जाएंगे, कुछ ना कुछ raise हो जाएगा. I think the more challenge can be there in case of services, and it says section 15 मैं दोबारा read करता हूँ sir, where any supplier supplies any goods or renders any services to any buyer, the buyer shall make payment thereof on or before the date agreed. And the date agreed cannot be more than 45 days. तो जहां पे मैं date agree कर लूंगा तो वहां तो कोई challenge नहीं है. तो for now, let's say if the services are completed on 28th Feb, so one may take a position that 45 days हमने agree करे थे, and one will get a bandwidth of 15 days. So which I wish to highlight that therein the document should be proper. Agreed upon between him and the supplier in writing, or where there is no agreement in this behalf before the appointed date. So the challenge is where there is no agreement, but wherein there is an agreement, the the due date would be within 45 days. Now, provided that in no case period agreed upon between the supplier and buyer in writing shall exceed 45 days from the date of acceptance or the date of deemed acceptance. And for this, if you go to section 2B, which defines date, what is date of acceptance, what is date of deed acceptance. So this time limit of 15 days or 45 days is not from the date of invoice. It is from the date of actual delivery of goods or services, or wherein there is no objection from that date, from the 15 days. So I think that is something which one needs to be very particular while reviewing position under section 43BH. Now with this, let me proceed. Then
गौरव
yes,
जी,
sir.
सर्विसेज के मैटर में तो इट विल डिपेंड ऑन केस टू केस,
Case to case, sir.
केस टू केस,
हाँ,
बिकॉज आई हैव क्लाइंट्स हु आर डूइंग गेटिंग फैब्रिकेशन डन. उनका ये होता है फैब्रिकेशन के बाद दे विल एग्जामिन द गुड्स, and whatever goods are not found proper, they will send them back for repair, and the balance will be accepted. But the total acceptance will be when the entire lot has been completely given to them.
absolutely.
So it will depend on that. कंस्ट्रक्शन में जब आपका ऑक्यूपेंसी सर्टिफिकेट आ गया तब आपका कवर हो जाएगा.
Correct. So the point which I wish to highlight, sir, in this case, that first of all, to best of my understanding, it is applicable on the registered entities. Secondly, invoice may not be the sole criteria to identify limit in section 15, because section 15 does not talk about the invoice. So these are 2 points, and also not every time the provision may be allowed. There could be a case that provision may also be disallowed if it get hit by the limit given in section 15.
And Gaurav ji, as an auditor, I will say my neck, not anybody else's neck. I will take a conservative view.
We'll take a conservative view, sir.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, under the tax audit, now the reporting needs to be done under clause 22. And in clause 22, one needs to give the total amount without any bifurcation. The total amount disallowed under section 43BH. So we have you all are learned auditors, and I'm weak in audit. But yes, now when you are evaluating 43BH, because of the volume, one may take a position that we have relied upon the representation of the client, and one may do the test checking. But yes, the accounting standards and the auditing standards issued by ICI must be duly followed, and you all are expert in that. I'm not the expert. I'm more a student of tax. So
गौरव जी, चैलेंज आएगा इंटरेस्ट कैलकुलेट करने में.
इंटरेस्ट कैलकुलेट करने में पूरा चैलेंज आएगा सर. Provided that, except the provision of clause H, so this is the remaining part of 43BH, it says, shall be allowed irrespective of the previous year in which the liability to pay such sum was incurred by the SSC according to the method of accounting regularly employed by him, only in computing the income referred in section 28 of that previous year in which sum is actually paid. In other cases, one will get a benefit even if the amount is paid before the return date, but that provision is except the provisions of clause H. So in clause H, it is strictly 31st March, or let's say if the limitation periods end on 10th of April and one makes the payment before 10th of April, then one can claim an expenditure or a deduction. In this case, let's say while computing income for 23-24.
Here I have a little bit different view.
Yes, sir.
You see, you read section H, what does it say? It says sum payable beyond the time limit. Because the proviso, in case of other clauses, takes me to the next year. But for clause H, there is no proviso, there is no provision which may take to the next year to verify whether payment has been made, and if made, when. But for other items, this proviso takes me to the next year to see whether payment has been made before due date of the filing of the return. But for this, and there is no such cap. You see the scheme of section 43B, what does it say? It says sum payable will be allowed in the year in which it will be paid. And then the proviso says that if you make payment in the next year before the due date of the filing of the return, then it will be preponed and you will get deduction in the respective year to which it pertains.
Correct.
But as regards 43BH is concerned, sum payable is itself qualified. Sum payable beyond the time limit. And there is no provision which takes me to the next year to see whether it has been paid before due date or not. So in my humble submission, sum payable beyond time limit as per section so and so, which is beyond time limit as on 31st March, only will get hit here. Not that which gets delayed in the next year. This
Sir,
is my
can you, sir,
personal view.
can you please take an example, sir? I think.
Yeah. Suppose for 25th March, some bill has come or some goods has been received on 25th March.
Correct.
On 31st March, it is not overdue. It is not beyond time limit. So 43B H, in my view, does not get triggered. Even if the payment is made, because I am not supposed to see when this payment was made in the next year. Suppose there are 45 days cap in this case. Take, for example, there was an agreement that it will be paid on 45 days. So the companies will hold up their balance sheets till 45 days. In bank audit, suppose we go and there are MSME suppliers in banks, so their audits will not get completed till that 45 days. You see all other clauses of 43B and then compare it with H. There is no such adjective or such no such qualifying there in any of the sections. And you may recall one earlier provision when this employer provident fund was there. Then for that there was a specific separate provision to link it with the payment within due date as per that. So the scheme is, first they said that it will be allowed in the year in which payment is made. And then by proviso they say, if you make payment in the next year before this date, then it will prepone to the year to which it pertains. But there is no such thing in case of 43H. 43BH specifically said some payable beyond time limit as per itne ke will be allowed in the year in which it is. So in my humble opinion, there is no provision which allows me to go and check in the next year when it has been paid. If it is overdue as on 31st March, then only it will be disallowed. If it is not overdue on 31st March, it will not be disallowed. This is my understanding of reading of this section.
I appreciate your point, sir. Any other view on this?
And I will share my article which I have placed on ITAT online. It is in two parts, and I will request all to give your views on that.
Sure, sir.
I may be differing.
I would request you to kindly share that article with me. I would share with other participants. So
I will just.
It means, sir, so as a auditor, we have to check that, verify the payment due 50 after 15th Feb to 31st March.
So, see,
one more thing. The 3B amendment is also that says linked to the returning date, that clause. They have not brought in separate clause for this.
नहीं वो सर चेंज हो गया. वो पहले clause 26 में था. Now that has been amended and it has been shifted to clause 22. वो भी शायद अभी 18-19 तारीख को it has been.
Okay, I'll check it up.
वो भी latestly अभी आई है.
I will check it up.
Earlier it was with clause 26 जहाँ पे it was returning date, but now that has been shifted. So my view is that it clearly says any sum payable by the SSC to micro or small enterprise beyond the time limit specified in section 15 shall be allowed only irrespective of the previous year in which the liability to pay such sum was incurred by the SSC according to the method, only in computing the income referred to in section 28 of that previous year in which the sum is actually paid by him.
One more in support of my argument. One more thing I will say. You see 48.3. There say expenditure to be made by account paid check, and there is a separate subsection which says that for the next year it will be deemed income if you make payment of that otherwise. So they themselves have recognized the expenditure made in cash during the year and the liability made in cash in the subsequent year.
I appreciate your point, sir.
गौरव जी, मैं कुछ बोलूं इसमें?
हाँ, अतुल जी, मैं एक बार अपना point of view रख देता हूँ, फिर आपका सुन लेते हैं. So, in my humble view, the law says any sum payable by the SSC, if there is any sum which is outstanding on 31st March, if that is paid beyond the time limit, then in such case it would be allowed based on the actual payment. But if it is paid within the time limit, then it would be allowed based on the accrual system of accounting. Simple. Now, even if you have made the payment before return of income, maybe in the next year, but before return of income, then the benefit of provision, the benefit of proviso is not given to clause H. So clause H is restricted only till here, which means if there is some payable on 31st March, if that sum payable is paid beyond the time limit, then it would be allowed on the actual payment basis. If it is paid within the time limit, then it would be allowed on the accrual basis. This is brief, what I can say about 43B. Now, Atulji, over to you.
If you read the clause, it says within the specified date. If the specified date falls on the 10th of April and it has been paid on or before 10th of April, it will be allowed. If it is paid beyond 10th of April, it will be disallowed in March 2024, but allowable in 2025.
On the actual payment basis.
Yes,
this is
on
my view, but
2025.
Pankaj is having
They-
different view,
they-
which I feel that is the beauty of the tax. You may have two views. So
पहले साल में प्रॉब्लम आएगी सबको, उसके बाद तो फिर रूटीन हो जाएगा.
routine हो जाएगा,
No.
कोई भी clarifications भी आ जाएगा.
No, I think Gaurav, the second interpretation is definitely a purposive interpretation. No, if it is paid within the period as prescribed under the Act,
Yeah.
then we are claiming it. Otherwise, it will not be claimable.
Correct.
It will be claimable in the next year. I think it has to be a constructive interpretation.
Absolutely. It is actually the clause, if you read, it itself says that.
Correct. So, but Pankaj ji has got a different view. I feel we belong to same school of thought. Pankaj ji belongs to a different school of thought. Pankaj ji is writing an article and probably he has written the article. He would be sharing with us. So I would request Pankaj sir.
I have shared on your group, on your mail, on your WhatsApp link.
So I would
सेमिनार
request.
अटेंड नहीं कर रहे हैं सेमिनार में अभी.
So Pankaj ji का
मैं सेमी का गौरव वाले.
I have shared my link to on your number.
Thank you, Pankaj ji. I got your link. I would be sharing my PPT and the article written by Pankaj ji
Please.
in my community group.
Please.
So I would request
And-
all of you.
And you may send your link to me also so that I may also join you.
Yes, sir. I will send the link.
Because I got your message through SVTC.
I would be sharing the community link, WhatsApp community link over an email and over a WhatsApp. So I would suggest keep track of your email and WhatsApp. With this, we have come to an end. Unless we have some query to discuss.
पंकज जी, गौरव जी, मेरी एक क्वेरी है.
हाँ जी सर, प्लीज.
हेलो.
ठीक.
हाँ मम्मी जी,
सर-
छाया नहीं आ रही है.
अरे
तो-
मम्मी जी,
हाँ.
शिखा जी,
ठीक है.
हाँ हाँ जी, अतुल जी प्लीज.
कि जैसे in the case of goods acceptance and the non-raising of invoice and the provision that we have clearly understood. In the case of services, because the terms and conditions can be like I argue an appeal, so I say okay, 50% give me at this time and 50% when the appeal is heard. But some clients say no when I receive the order. So at that stage, what will be the date of providing services? His
No,
acceptance
let's
of service will be when?
If we have, sir, this is again a view which we need to take. So if let's say you and me have agreed that the service would be completed on receipt of the order, then service should be considered to be completed on the receipt of the order.
Yes. But if according to me, if I have invoiced him, according to the day I argued the appeal on, then what will be the position of the assessee?
Then you should not raise an invoice, because in that case there is no acceptance, sir. Under section 15, appointed date, if there is a mail in writing, if we have agreed in writing that I would consider, as a client, I would consider service to be completed on the receipt of the order, to which you have also agreed, then the services will be completed on the receipt of the order, to best of my understanding. I can always
If
argue.
I have not agreed, I say I will, the day I argue the appeal, I will send the bill. But he raises an objection that I will pay, then acceptance will be when the order is received.
And then in that case, one may say that services got completed, correct?
Mhm.
But the due date is, when the order, when I will get the order. So
यार,
the
order तो
time
4
limit,
महीने के बाद आता है.
but in such case, time limit would be restricted to 45 days.
Okay.
Sir, there is one concern I have. Hello.
Please,
audible?
हाँ लोकेश जी please.
सर इसमें कंसर्न ये है कि हम अगर कुछ वेंडर्स के साथ में पेमेंट हम डिसाइड करते हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल उसमें क्या रिटेंशन पीरियड का होता है क्लॉज कि 5 महीने की परफॉर्मेंस सही रहेगी, जब उसके बाद में 10% देंगे, मतलब 90% हमने पहले दे दिया, 10% जब देंगे जब आप वो 5 महीने तक वो सक्सेसफुली परफॉर्मेंस करेगी, तो उस केस में क्या होगा?
फिर उस केस में तो this appointed date, this concept goes in your favor. It says the date of actual delivery of goods or rendering of services or where any objection is made in writing by the buyer regarding acceptance of goods or services. So which means for 6 months, जो भी whatever you have agreed, you want to see that project or that services are properly working or not. So acceptance indeed is happening after 5 months.
Okay.
So before 5 months, acceptance is not, there is no acceptance. Acceptance is happening after 5 months, to my understanding, going by the terms.
Agreed, but there is one
Because
case
if
that
something
case.
happens, then why I'm saying if something happens within that 5 month or 3 months for which you have kept the retention money, then the service provider or the one who has delivered a project to you, he must be under obligation to correct that or to work on that. Correct? So if that is the case, in such case, services should not be considered as completed.
Gaurav, it's not that the services provided are not correct. You are absolutely fine. Only then they have made the full payment, barring the retention money. It's a customary in mostly the contractors. In sometimes it is 1 year or 2 years also.
Then if, sir, we need to read the agreement, if it is simply a customary that I will make you payment after 1 year or 2 year, then it could be considered as that, we have agreed to defer the payment till 1 year. But going by section 2B, whether one can say that services are completed or not. If as per agreement read with section 2B, services are completed, it's only that you want to, hold the payment for 1 year or 2 year, then I think the maximum period which one can hold a period under MSME Act is 45 days and not 1 year. So we need to see that whether 1 year should be read as 45 days or 1 year should be read as non-acceptance of services or non-completion of services.
इसका मतलब गौरव जी हमको सारे एग्रीमेंट, सारे कंडीशन वगैरह सारी स्टडी करनी पड़ेगी फिर तो।
नहीं, but Gaurav again,
हम तो
I
पागल हो
think
जाएंगे यार।
Gaurav again, I think 2 years, the very fact that the MSME Act has a period of 45 days mentioned there is to kind of circumvent or cover the times when you would like to, when a big company will like to superimpose on a small and medium micro industry by saying that I'll pay you after 2 years, right? So that is why 45 days has been there. So it will have to be, to my mind, respected in that case.
Correct. So this is what I'm saying, Mike, we need to see whether that 1 year is only to defer the payment or indeed, there is some clause which says services are not completed.
हाँ, फिर ठीक है. Okay.
So if it is the case wherein the services are completed, then the maximum period would be 45 days. But if services are not completed, there is some provision of services still going on, then there could be the separate matter. Vivek bhai, you want to say something?
Correct.
I have a question, Gaurav.
Yes, please.
In case of government companies, mostly payments are made in 2 months, 3 months time, not 45 days. Even so, is there any exemption to them?
The Act does not give any exemption.
So what will happen? Even government companies are not making payment to MSMEs within 45 days, but they are not bothered also to look at this provision. I have MSME clients who are supplying to the government companies, and they are saying हमें तो कोई पैसे आते ही नहीं है, ना वो कोई पूछ रहे हैं हमें, ना कोई बॉदर कर रहा है।
देखिए मेरे हिसाब से
they are hit by this section का उनकी पेमेंट तो उधर से आ रही है 6 महीने के बाद, इधर इनको पेमेंट करनी पड़ रही है।
I think there is no specific exemption to government companies in the MSME Act. I think it equally applies to them also. So your point is valid, but to my knowledge, there is no exemption. If anyone other participant is aware that there is any benefit to the government companies, they may please tell us. But I am not aware whether there is any benefit or
What I
not.
mean to say is, government itself is not paying attention to this provision to make payment at the earliest.
एक बार डिसअलाउंस आएगी ना, वो अपने आप कर लेगा, अगले साल से कर लेगा. सो कहीं ना कहीं या तो वो ऑब्जेक्शन उठा देंगे, जी आपकी सर्विसेज में ऑब्जेक्शन है, कुछ ना कुछ तो करेंगे. आई थिंक इट इज अ चैलेंज ऑफ द फर्स्ट ईयर. नेक्स्ट ईयर से उनके इंटरनल ऑडिट या ऑडिटर्स के कमेंट से एवरीवन विल गेट एनलाइटन. So let's wait for some clarification from the government on this. So we have another question coming up from Rajiv ji. He has joined us on a YouTube. The question is, in case of a check has been issued within time limit to SME vendor, but the vendor presents the check late, but before the check got stale, we'll add that there was a bank balance to the honor the check on the day of issuance of check. What will happen in that case? Join. Acha. Rajiv ji, to best of my mind, if it is not a planning, but genuinely one has issued the check and you are saying now there is no balance outstanding in your books, and tomorrow the whether there is a balance or not, on 31st March there is no balance. On 31st March you have issued a check, so your books will say there is no balance. So when you are closing your books, there is no balance on 31st March and it is applicable on the balance. But the tax authorities or the auditor may say that this is a planning you have done to come out from the ambit of 43B. I think in that case one needs to prove that in all other cases what I have done is I have made the payment, the check got cleared. I think this is only the case. This is an exception wherein the vendor has not made the payment. But let's say if the case is that you have issued the check and almost all the vendors are doing the same thing, they are dancing on your flute, then probably one may create a problem.
और गौरव जी वैसे भी the law says on actual payment. This doesn't mean actual payment. Post dated checks are not actual payment.
No, I beg to differ.
Yes, Pankaj ji.
I have taken this question in my shared that also. We are a commerce students and we have heard of one concept of bill of exchange also. I replace this check with the term bill of exchange. Suppose I issue a 60 days bill of exchange, accept a bill of exchange from the supplier. Will that not be a constructive actual payment? Because in that case, on issuance of a bill of exchange, my liability is not towards supplier, but it is towards holder of the bill of exchange. Similarly, check is also a bill of exchange. And when I issue a check, I discharge my liability towards supplier and my liability now towards the holder of the check. And there are Supreme Court decisions also which says the date of payment in case of check will be the date of issuance of the check. And for that purpose, we have to refer to the Negotiable Instrument Act. Actual payment does not mean that it has to be debited from my bank account. We have to refer to the provisions of Negotiable Instrument Act, and those provisions will come into play here. I have elaborately explained this aspect because this was issue going on after one or two video presentation. So I have referred Negotiable Instrument Act provisions also, Supreme Court decision also, because actual issuance of check date. But as you said that it should not be a planning that I made a check and kept it in my drawer, and the other party denies that I have not received the check. Then it will be a problem. But if I have issued a check and he has accepted it, then when he puts into his bank account, then it's a different story.
Correct, sir. Luckily this time my view got matched with your view as far as checks are concerned.
Similarly, if I issue a bill of exchange also, not a check, I accept a bill of exchange of a supplier, it will also discharge my liability.
मगर पंकज इसमें एक इशू आता है that the amounts, the checks you have issued as on 31st March, that balance, collective balance must continue to be maintained in your bank account.
Not necessary.
Sir,
my arrangement should be such that it gets cleared when it is presented. That's all.
Sir, if you issue a check when there is not sufficient balance, then even Negotiable Instrument Act Section 138 comes against you.
I will request, let's come back
that
to
that will arise only when it gets dishonored.
So let's come back to 43BH and the view that we conclude that if you have issued a check.
गौरव एक पॉइंट और है
हाँ जी,
रजिस्ट्रेशन
just a minute.
हाँ
So the view that we conclude is that if we have issued the check, that should be considered as a payment until it is a planning to come out from the 43B. Now Vivek bhai, over to you.
हाँ रजिस्ट्रेशन का एक सिग्निफिकेंस है एमएसएमई एक्ट में रजिस्ट्रेशन होना चाहिए अगर किसी सप्लायर ने रजिस्ट्रेशन को अपडेट नहीं किया है फॉर क्लासिफिकेशन अपडेशन नहीं किया है तो उसको क्या मैं रजिस्टर्ड मानूं या अनरजिस्टर्ड मानूं?
सर उस केस में ना एमएसएमई जो है जो ये पोर्टल है ये कहता है कि वी विल टेक अ डेटा फ्रॉम इनकम टैक्स और फ्रॉम द जीएसटी. सो उसमें वट एवर द पोर्टल सजेस्ट यू, बिकॉज यू कैन नॉट गो एंड इन्वेस्टिगेट कि यार
नहीं गौरव उसमें क्लासिफिकेशन ईयर दिया हुआ है रजिस्ट्रेशन सर्टिफिकेट में कि क्लासिफिकेशन फॉर द ईयर 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24. अब मेरे पास जो सर्टिफिकेट आ रहा है उसमें सिर्फ क्लासिफिकेशन 21, 22 का है. उस केस में फॉर एग्जांपल 23, 24 के लिए वो अपग्रेड हो गया और मीडियम हो गई वो कंसर्न.
मेरे ख्याल गौरव जी रजिस्ट्रेशन उनके लिए जरूरी है which have to be registered in any other law. उसमें इंडिविजुअल्स कवर नहीं होते, अनरजिस्टर्ड पार्टीज फिर कवर नहीं होती, एलएलपी होगी, ट्रस्ट होगी which are registered otherwise under any other act. उनके केस में रजिस्ट्रेशन मैंडेटरी है.
नहीं रजिस्ट्रेशन तो एमएसएमई एक्ट में सभी के लिए है,
मैंडेटरी है सर सबके लिए. उसमें सर विवेक जी माय व्यू इज वन शुड गेट अ सर्टिफिकेट फ्रॉम द वेंडर.
सर्टिफिकेट फॉर एग्जांपल मार्च 20 का सर्टिफिकेट है, उसके बाद उसने कोई अपडेट नहीं किया उसको,
उससे अपडेटेड सर्टिफिकेट ले लीजिए वरना पोर्टल रिफ्लेक्ट करेगा उसकी कैटेगरी क्या है.
नहीं पोर्टल ऑटोमेटिक रिफ्लेक्ट नहीं करता है, उस पर्सन को लॉगिंग करके अपडेट करना पड़ता है तभी वो
उसको अपडेट कराना पड़ेगा सर.
अगर वो अपडेटेड सर्टिफिकेट नहीं देता है तो मैं उसको फॉर द ईयर 23, 24 अनरजिस्टर्ड नहीं मान सकता.
गौरव जी, इससे फर्क क्लासिफिकेशन से क्या फर्क पड़ेगा? एमएसएमई में तीनों क्लासिफिकेशन जो है.
नहीं अगर मीडियम में चला गया तो 43B नहीं
एप्लीकेबल. अट्रैक्ट नहीं होगा ना. 43B is only attracted to micro and small and not to medium.
Yes.
So classification is very important.
Yes, or yearly classification.
So at best, sir, Vivek, what you can do, you can write an email that we request you to kindly give us the updated certificate, and in case you will not give us the updated certificate, we will consider you as non-registered.
Exactly. एक रिक्वेस्ट कर सकता हूँ आपको, जितने भी क्वेश्चन आ रहे हैं उनको एनालाइज करके उनके जो आंसर्स हैं वो व्हाट्सएप पे डाल देना यार हमारे लिए.
सर मैं सबसे रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा जहां जो जिसके चैलेंज है वो अपना व्यू शेयर करें एंड वी कैन कंसोलिडेट व्यू एंड सर्कुलेट अमंग प्रोफेशनल्स.
Great.
So the recording of this is available on the YouTube channel. You can go there. You can again view the recording. And if you have any other suggestion or any other comment and where you feel you can contribute, feel free to share your view with me in a PDF with your name. And I would be happy to share that view in the larger community, which on my WhatsApp. That should not be a challenge. Pankaj ji has already shared an article link to his article, which I would be sharing on a WhatsApp community tomorrow. आपका भी कोई व्यू हो, आप में से किसी का कोई व्यू हो जो आपको लगता है कंट्रोवर्शियल है एंड यू हैव डन मतलब सिंपली बाइनरी मोड में आंसर नहीं दे रहे हो और you have done a research and that view is properly backed up by the research, please share. I would be happy to share that in my WhatsApp community. Stock in hand is a issue, but to my mind, first stock goes to the purchase. Purchase is a deduction, and then from purchase it goes to a stock. So, being you have made a purchase, it should be seen as a deduction, and if the amount is outstanding, then the similar purchases, the amount of purchases you have made, should be disallowed. What if enterprise registration? I would still go with the, that the purchases should have been gone to the P&L. What if enterprise has taken a registration as manufacturer but providing trading services also? Then whether 43B will be available. See, 43B, see, the purpose is, that there is a industrial unit or a manufacturing unit. They are manufacturing and giving you the goods produced or goods manufactured, and they are registered. But if someone is registered as a manufacturer and also carries on a trading business, then we may take a view that 43B is not applicable on the trading income.
अमाउंट ट्रेडर्स को पे करना, उसके ऊपर 43BH हमने अप्लाई नहीं करना, unless they are suppliers to NMS, एक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एंटिटी.
गौरव, मेरा इसमें डिफरेंट व्यू है. अगर उसके पास मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एंड सर्विसेज का सर्टिफिकेट है तो मैं उसके स्टॉक को क्लासिफाई मैं कैसे कर सकता हूँ एज ए ऑडिटर या एज ए जो है बायर, कि उसने मुझे ट्रेडिंग वाला गुड्स भेजा है या मैन्युफैक्चर्ड गुड्स भेजा है.
नहीं, विवेक भाई, आई एग्री विद यू. बट जो क्वेश्चन है तो उन्होंने पूछा था कि इट इज द ट्रेडिंग इनकम, सो दे वर अवेयर. वेयर इन द क्लाइंट इज नॉट अवेयर कि वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग करके करा या ट्रेडिंग करके करा. तो वैसे तो देखो, वो भी, उसको भी पता होता है कि उसने अपने ब्रांड से करा या वो किसी और का ब्रांड बेच रहा है. तो बायर को तो पता होता है कि वेदर गुड्स आर मैन्युफैक्चर्ड और नॉट. बट वो जो बायर है वो ऑडिटर को बताएगा नहीं बताएगा. इट इज अ सेपरेट चैलेंज.
नहीं, इस केस में मेरे पास एक केस आया तो मैंने उससे कहा कि आप अपने सप्लायर को बोलो कि अपना सर्टिफिकेट अपडेट कराएं, उसको ट्रेडिंग का करवाएं और एक लेटर हेड पे जो है मुझे डिक्लेरेशन लिख के दें कि ये सर्टिफिकेट गलत लिया हुआ था मैंने.
Okay. So with this, if you allow, I would like to close the discussion. It's already been 90 minutes. So there are still a lot of questions. If you still have questions, I would suggest to kindly WhatsApp me. I will try to compile them and we'll try to issue, one consolidated view. For an academic purpose, it should not be seen as opinion. It should be seen only in academic discussion. So thanks a ton to all of you for joining in today's discussion. I feel, I trust it would have been useful to all of you. Thanks to everyone who has contributed, especially to Pankaj Agrawal ji and Atul ji for sharing their perspective. So see you in the next session.
Thanks, Gaurav ji. Thanks a lot. You are always a great inspiration for all of us.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.